Hey guys, Barry McGee here, back for another episode of the Comeback Game podcast. Today I've got Steve Olsher, mate. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks.
Fantastic. So, mate, I've got down that you're a forensic strategist, host of the Reinvention Radio, New York Times bestselling author for What Is Your What, founder of Liquor.com, and more recently, you launched a new show, Beyond Eight Figures.
That's true.
Mate, pretty impressive bio for someone who came from selling speakers out the back of their car.
There are days where I think maybe going back to selling speakers out of the back of a car would be an easier gig. It's been a long time since I sold speakers out of the back of a car, but nevertheless, I think they're all stepping stones to get to where you are now. No?
Yeah, definitely. So, mate, I'm curious to kind of understand, like, how did you get to where you are now? Like, pretty impressive bio. You're followed by a lot of people. You're very much an influence in the space. Like, how did one get to where you are right now?
One interview at a time, right? I mean, honestly, it's kind of like it is now, and just sitting down, chatting to amazing people like yourselves. And reality is I can only reach so many people on my own. So I do a lot of these, and I mean, we don't have to. We can go into specifics in terms of sort of the background, and I mean, I opened a nightclub when I was 19, right? So I mean, I've always been wired as an entrepreneur, so long entrepreneurial journey. But in terms of the following, in terms of just having some degree of notoriety, and look, I got a long way to go. It's honestly saying yes to a lot of these types of opportunities that frankly a lot of other people might say no to, and I don't know why. I guess I just understand where I came from, and I understand that I wouldn't be where I am now unless a lot of people had said yes to me, right? So I guess that's kind of how I look at it from the standpoint of building up a following, so to speak. And don't get me wrong, my following is not massive, right? I mean, I have more people on my email list than I do followers because I'm just not big on social media.
Yeah. And looking back then, where do you feel that you first got that leg up? Like you said that entrepreneurism's kind of been in the blood from a young age, but where do you feel was that first leg up that you kind of got, or the first sign that you knew that you were destined for greater things?
I mean, look, I'll sit here today and tell you with full transparency that I don't really feel like, I guess when those sort of phrases and thoughts are thrown around at me, definitely the imposter syndrome kind of kicks in. I mean, there's like, I don't feel like I've, made it, so to speak. Yeah. But I will say this, that in terms of saying yes to opportunities, it really goes back to way back when in my embryonic stages of being an entrepreneur, which if I'm being completely honest about it, I mean, I really think that it really stems from one conversation that I had with a mentor of mine, who I was talking to about opening up this club that I had mentioned. And I mean, I was young. I was 19 years old, and I was thinking about opening up my own nightclub. And I had actually been DJing in clubs and had built up a pretty good following. And I thought there might be an opportunity to take it to the next step and open my own club. Because I thought people would, come and check out a club if I opened that. And so anyway, I was kicking around this idea, and I was 19, and I knew it couldn't be an alcoholic club. It would have to be a non-alcoholic club. But I did think there was an opportunity there because where this club was going to be built, now there wasn't much for the teenagers to do. So we thought maybe we could cater to the teenagers early, like maybe, 8 p.m. to like 11:30 p.m., something like that, and cater to those 18 and under. And then we would close up and clean up. And then we'd reopen at midnight and stay open till 4, 5, 6 in the morning for those who are 18 and over. Yeah. And because the bars had to close fairly early, around 1:30, it seemed like there was an opportunity there to have kind of a late night club where there just wouldn't be any competition. So anyway, that's the kind of the gist of what the club would be. And of course, a dance club, playing music and serving non-alcoholic drinks and food and so on. But I was talking to my mentor, who happened to actually be a golf coach of mine at the time. And I was talking to him about the idea, and he said, yeah, I mean, I think it's a really good idea. I mean, why wouldn't you do it? And I said, I'm afraid of looking bad. I'm afraid of losing money. I'm afraid of not being able to recover. Like, I don't know. I guess I'm just afraid of what's going to happen if it doesn't work out. And he said, well, remind me what it is that you're doing now for money. And I told him, I said, well, I'm DJing in the clubs, but I'm also waiting tables and I'm pumping gas. I'm working at a gas station over here. I'm doing whatever I got to do here to make ends meet. And what he said was, paraphrasing a bit here, but basically what he said was, I think it's a good idea. I think you should go forward and do it. And reality is, if things don't come to fruition in the way that you envision and things don't work out with the club, you can always go back to pumping gas. And it was just one of those phrases that I think kind of has been a mantra now. You have thousands of conversations with people over the years and certain things just stick. This is just one of those things that just kind of stuck. And it's been a mantra. It's just been something that I've remembered to this day, that if things don't work out with whatever it is, I can always go back to something else that I know.
And do you think your appetite for risk has changed from 19 years old to where you are now? Like, do you find that as you get older, you get, wiser, so to speak, or you're less likely to take the same risks you were back then? Or do you feel that you're more confident now in taking bigger risks because there has been, a trail of things kind of working out to some degree to get to where you are right now?
Yeah, it is interesting. I've been sort of in what I might call a coasting sort of mode, neutral, if you will, for the better part of, well, I'll put it this way. My oldest son is 15, and pretty much every day, now that he's older, he's in high school now, I don't have to do this, but pretty much every day, I've been able to take the kids to school, been able to pick them up, coach their teams. They just haven't known daddy to work like a typical 9 to 5. They haven't known him to work, crazy long hours and this, that, and the other. Right. So reality is, I think that some of that risk taking early on allowed me to be where I am now. And I'm a little more risk adverse. I'm actually looking at a pretty big opportunity right now. And I got to tell you, there's definitely some hesitation. There's definitely some hesitation about losing what it is that I've been able to attain. And that's a very, very real fear right now.
And how does those words of that mentor kind of ring through now? Because I noticed myself as well, like, how I showed up in business years ago was very different to how I show up in business now. Yeah. Back then it was very much about the short game and about the hustle and about just getting things going. And now I notice myself thinking in 3 years and in 5 years and 10 years, and very much playing a lot longer term strategic game. And there's an element of risk, but the risk is a lot more calculated now than what it used to be. And yeah, I suppose for me, I've been reflecting on a bit lately, like looking back, that risk always paid off. Even the things that didn't work out the way that I wanted, there was still a lesson in those. Yeah. But how are you finding that those words of advice from that mentor is kind of serving with this opportunity that's happening for you right now?
It's interesting, because the best way to put it is, when I was 19, there was only so far I could fall. It's like you don't have much, right? So there's a lot less, even though it's a risk, there's a lot less at risk. Yeah. And so now with my kids being older and I'm older, and my energy, is good, but it isn't what it was when I was 20, right? Yeah. So it is interesting, man. I hear him talking, and I hear that, that phrase, that mantra, and yet reality is, for me, I don't know if I want to go back to pumping gas at this point in my career. You know what I mean?
Yeah. 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 It's a valid point. I suppose, like, what is your what? And have you found that that's changed for you over the last 5, 10, 15 years?
Yeah, and I will say that for lack of a better term, I mean it's probably a bit of a cop out, but my what really at this stage is helping people discover, share, and monetize theirs. Right,
Yeah.
I really find that to be the most fulfilling work that I do,
Yeah.
and the truth is, um, I just I don't really know if age has something to do with it, or if it's simply a reflection of just really understanding that it doesn't take as much as people might think
Mm.
to be able to sustain a fairly decent lifestyle,
Mm.
right, without having to kill yourself to make that happen. And so I think that what I've become very clear on is that you can absolutely create whatever that lifestyle is for you that you desire without having to go through all that crazy hustle and grind that so
Mm.
many other people teach. And I think that's what I really love doing now, is showing people how to create that life, to create that lifestyle, just by being very strategic
Mm.
about what it is that they do, so that they can share their what on a
Mm.
consistent basis with those that they're most compelled to serve, and not kill themselves in the process.
Yeah. And in all the work that you've done with these people, like, what do you think is that stops most business owners or most entrepreneurs getting there? Because I completely agree with you, and I suppose that's something that we've kind of been going against for a while now. Is this thing that's portrayed in social media that to have a successful company or have a fulfilling life, you need to work 80 hours a week. Like, to me, I don't see how that's even logical when the core driver of most people is to create a better life for themselves and their family, to be there to see their kids grow up. How is
Yeah.
working 80 hours a week able to provide that?
Yeah. Yeah. And it doesn't. I mean, and it may for the short term, but in the long term, something's going to suffer. I
Yeah.
mean, it's just, there's no balance there. So something is going to suffer, whether it's your health, your relationships, or, I mean, something's going to take a hit.
Yeah. So what do you think it is that stops entrepreneurs or business owners, like, creating that decent lifestyle? Because if you look at the success rate of business, you're talking 4% of businesses get past that 5-year mark, and a further
Yeah.
4% make it past the second 5-year mark.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, honestly, it's not, it's twofold. Number one, and take this with a grain of salt, but what I have found is that most people just aren't asking for the sale enough. I mean, it's really just as simple as that. That, I mean, if you think back on this last week, how many times did you actually ask for the sale? How
Mm.
many times did you actually ask someone to enroll in a relevant product, program, or service?
Mm.
And I think that's what ends up happening for so many business owners, is they don't ask enough,
Mm.
and they feel like it's slimy, or they don't want to get involved with just being this hardcore salesperson. And what ends up happening is the revenue suffers as a result.
Mm.
And in short order, like you said, they just won't be in business. And that, combined with the fact that I know from experience that so many entrepreneurs just don't understand what to do when they're told no. And you've just got to go through 100 people telling you no before you're going to hear that one yes. And a lot of entrepreneurs they're just not wired in that way.
Mm.
And that's what in the long run ends up killing them. Not literally killing them, but certainly killing the business, is
Mm.
because it is simply a matter of of knocking on enough doors. And I think that most entrepreneurs who go out of business either A, don't ask for the sale enough, or B, just get dissuaded by the number of no's that they hear, and they figure that nobody wants this.
Do you think it stems from a lack of self-belief, or a belief in their product or service that they're offering?
Yeah, and it also stems from, in a lot of cases, it stems from having enough capital to see them through, because there's always going to be ebbs and flows in business. And when the going gets tough, too many entrepreneurs aren't willing to do not what's the right thing to do necessarily, but it's certainly the hard thing to do, which is oftentimes just having to let go of people earlier than they do, having to cut back on certain expenses. I mean, just making logical decisions that in the moment really just what they end up doing is illogical, is the best way to put it. And
emotional.
And emotional, yeah. And it's hard to separate the two. It's definitely hard to separate the emotion from the logical, if you will, when it comes to business. And I get that, but oftentimes that unwillingness to delineate between the two is a recipe for disaster.
And that being said, it's something that resilience is not necessarily bred in us. I don't think it's something that we have to create, have to chase, have to build through having those doors slammed.
Yeah, but I don't think you can teach it. I just don't. People talk about, are entrepreneurs born, or are they made, or that sort of thing. And I don't think you can make an entrepreneur. I think you're born to. You're born with a specific sort of wiring to excel, and you either have it or you don't. And it's the same thing with perseverance and resilience. And some people just are not. They just don't have it built in that way. And reality is in business, you're going to go through a lot of trials and tribulations. You just are. And you just don't have the luxury of resting on your laurels when it's time to put the pedal down and tap into that resilience and that need to persevere. And the truth is, sometimes you're running enthusiastically in the wrong direction, right? And that's a big part of the problem. Is if you don't have someone to look at what you're doing and to help you understand where the biggest opportunity is and how to pursue that, it doesn't matter what it is that you do, then you're going to hear no, because you're either A, knocking on the wrong doors with the wrong product, program, or service, or B, you're heading down a path where you're just not clear on the value that you bring to the table and who you bring that value to the table for, right? So there's a lot of variables that go into business that sometimes when you're the entrepreneur, it's really hard to see. And you could have the best product, program, or service in the world, but you literally may be putting it in front of the wrong people, and you just can't figure that out.
Yeah. I think there's, if you look at meta-programming of our psychology, as human beings will do far more to keep $1 million than we will to go and create $1 million. And I think that often, entrepreneurs get fixated on a specific set way of doing things, or like you talk about, a specific product or specific market, without being open or having the resilience to knock on other doors or try something else if it's not working.
Yeah. And and the truth is that there are people out there who are really, really smart and have tremendous talents in so many arenas. But being a CEO may not necessarily be one of their talents.
Yeah.
And I see that a lot. I mean, we're experiencing that in one of our companies right now, where the CEO is a tremendous people person. I mean, he develops relationships with high level influencers better than anyone I've ever seen. Like he is so good from a people perspective in terms of developing those relationships.
Yeah.
But in terms of being a CEO and running the business in an effective manner and really laying out the vision for growth and bringing that growth vision to fruition and running the business in an efficient manner. I mean, those are not areas of strength. And so that's part of what happens too, is it's just hard to let go of those key activities when you can't afford to bring in someone else to handle those, right? So it's a chicken and an egg game. But at some point, you just have to take a step back and say, am I really the right person for this position, or is there a better place for me, even if it's within my own company?
Yeah, I think it's the difference between, like I talk about in the book Rocket Fuel, the difference between like visionary and integrator, and being clear on those roles. And you know yourself, it's like as you grow a company from naught to $1 million, there's several stages that business has to go through.
Yeah.
And each stage of business requires a slightly different mindset and different decision-making strategy in order to transition to the next level of growth.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, Michael Gerber is kind of the originator of a lot of that thinking with the E-Myth. And we've had a chance to sit down with Michael on Reinvention Radio, and I've read his books over the years, and it's true. I mean, there's just different stages of a business's life cycle, and what got you to point A as the entrepreneur oftentimes won't get you to point B. I mean, that's a lot of what we talk about on the show Beyond Eight Figures. Is exactly that. I mean, we sit down exclusively with entrepreneurs who have either exited for more than $10 million or currently run businesses that gross more than $10 million annually. And what we have found quite frequently is that the God's honest truth is what got them to $1 million is almost irrelevant as they're looking to scale to 5, 10, 20, $50 million. It doesn't work in the same ways, and it won't work in the same ways. Right. So it is really interesting to hear how, sometimes even in really heartbreaking fashion, they've had to move beyond some of the people who helped them to get to that point where they could scale. Yeah. And oftentimes it's a sad story because, it's a completely different skill set.
What do you think are some of the skills or the attributes to grow a company from that 7 to 8 figure mark? Like obviously through Beyond 8 Figures, you've had a chance to sit down with a number of these people and kind of dive inside their psychology, their mindset, the decision making. Like, what do you think are some of the key attributes that you've seen or the patterns you've seen between these people?
Yeah. So I would say that one of the biggest common threads, if you will, that I see amongst the people that we sit down with is a willingness to understand that they may bring in someone who is half as good as they are, like especially from a sales perspective. Like most entrepreneurs, and I mean, I'm in this boat right now with the work that I'm doing under the let's just call it the Steve Olsher brand. And I'm in that same boat right now. I mean, like right in this moment, I am the one who takes the stage. I am the one who is out preaching about what it is that we're doing and how it can benefit companies, et cetera. And this approach with my leading the charge and doing those presentations and taking the stage and having, in-depth conversations with prospects, I still do 90% of that, right?
Mm.
And I am really good at what I do. But if this business is to get to 5 million or 10 million or wherever it is, I mean, we'll do a couple $1 million this year with my leading the charge, and I've got no full-time employees. Reality is, though, if I want to scale it, and of course that's the question too, is do you actually want to scale it?
Yeah.
I mean, do you want to have payroll? Do you want to have full-time people, right? And I'm not convinced that I do. I mean, I work 3 days a week, and I've got several multi-billion-dollar companies, and do I want to do that with this brand? I don't know. But for those who do, one of the common threads that I've seen consistently is you have to be willing to let someone else, whatever that initiative is, whatever that that sales conversation is, whatever that stage conversation, like whatever that is where you're putting yourself out front and center. In order to scale, you have to accept the fact that whoever you bring in to also do that is probably going to be half as good as you are. And that's okay, because even if they're half as good as you are, if you have 2 of them on the street, now you have the equivalent of 1 of you.
Yeah.
And if you have 4 of them on the street, now you have the equivalent of 2 of you.
Yeah.
8 of them on the street, 4 of you, et cetera, right? So they might be half as good as you are in whatever facet of your business is that you're looking to scale and replace yourself with. But they could be 60% as good as you are. They could be 70% as good as you are. And a couple of those, and now we start to scale, right? And that's ultimately what you have to really sit down and think about in terms of as you look to grow your businesses and as you look to scale. Is that something that you actually want to do, and why do you want to do it? Right? I don't think a lot of entrepreneurs answer those 2 key questions. Yeah.
And do you reckon that's the difference of someone who has the ability to scale a business fast and someone that struggles, is that there's a deeper desire and connection to why they're actually doing what they're doing?
Yeah. And what it is that they actually want. One of the core questions that I've been able to really figure out that I need to be able to answer is, what is it that I want versus what is it that I actually need?
Yeah.
And right now, and I think that's probably why I've been sort of in this state of neutral and coasting, if you will, for the better part of 12, 14, 15 years now, is because I have what I need.
Yeah.
And I'm not one of those guys who needs to have a garage full of Lamborghinis. It's just like, that's not my thing. I mean, occasionally I'll drive one. I like driving them every now and again, but I don't need a garage full of depreciating assets, right? Yeah. So, and I've lived in the big house. I mean, we had a 5,500 square foot house at one point, and the truth is we used about a third of it.
Yeah.
And now we're in a 2,300 square foot house. And if I took you around this house, you'd see that we use pretty much every square inch of it.
Yeah.
So what do you want versus what do you need?
Yeah. Yeah. And do you think that changes with age though as well? Do you think as you get older, you start to maybe realize that what you chased when you were younger was potentially more from an egotistical aspect and needing to fit in or needing to prove yourself or needing to feel like you belong, as opposed to an actual desire to make a difference?
Absolutely. And I think that's where a lot of self-confidence comes in, is you feel like your confidence and your worth Your self-worth stems from a lot of those external variables, right? And the truth is, I mean, I get it. I get it. And at this point, I recognize that I'm not going to win Mr. Olympia. I mean, I'm not going to have this crazy 6-pack social media physique. Like that's just not going to be me. I recognize I'm not going to have FU money, and I recognize that we're probably not going to have a house on the Riviera, my own island, or anything of that nature. The God's honest truth is I'm okay with all those things.
Yeah. And so if you were to jump in a time machine and go back and have a conversation with, 12, 13-year-old version of yourself, knowing all that you know now, what would be the advice that you'd give them?
It's interesting. I have a history of being early into things and getting out before the real payday, if you will, comes to play. Just let me give you an example. So I actually launched online on CompuServe's electronic mall in 1993, right? So I've been online for 25 years.
Wow.
And we launched a fully functional e-commerce site in 1995, the same year as Amazon launching their site. And the reality is I gave up on that business too soon and missed out on really the bigger payoff, if you will, that would have waited if I had stayed the course. Same thing in real estate. I got involved in real estate quite heavily, and I let go of a number of assets where the returns were decent, but could have been much, much, much better just a few years later. I mean, for example, when my grandfather passed, there was a building that he had bought as the headquarters for the company that he had built. And we, as a family, ended up inheriting that building. And it was a 60,000 square foot building in Chicago, in a decent location, kind of an up and coming location. And when we didn't know anything about real estate, and didn't seek out counsel to really help us figure out what to do with that real estate. We just didn't know anything about it at the time. And we ended up selling that building for $425,000 in 1994. And had we just simply held on to the building and figured out, some things to do with it and just kept it, that same building 6 years later, not even, 60 years later, 6 years later, that same building would have been a $4.5 million building, right? Yeah. So it's those sort of things where you just, if I were to go back and talk to my younger self, I would just simply say, seek counsel more often and be patient more often.
Yeah. And is that what you feel has helped you to become so passionate now about what you do, helping business owners and entrepreneurs to kind of find their what?
Yeah, and I do think it really boils down to what I enjoy the most is helping people see the biggest opportunity that they just can't. And what I know is that, so many entrepreneurs, like if I sat down with you and we went over where you are in your business and what it is that you're doing, I mean, in a matter of an hour or two, I could help you easily identify where the real gold is in your business and that 6 or 7 figure opportunity. And you could literally leave everything else alone if you just pursued that one opportunity. And so I think that's really what all of this has led to is helping me to become much clearer on how it is that I can help others in that way. So, yeah, I mean, it's been a trek, and at the end of the day, I think what's really taken place for me here is just a sense of clarity around what works and what doesn't work. Unlike anything that I've ever known anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. Great answer. Great answer. And I suppose for the people out there that are watching this today or listening to this, like, what is 3 bits of advice that you give to business owners or to entrepreneurs out there that are maybe struggling or looking to want to take things to the next level, based on your past experience and based on all the people you've worked with, the conversations you've had?
Yeah.
What are 3 key bits of advice that still stick with you today?
Yeah, and I think the easiest way to do this is probably just to wrap it around the what is your what framework. And so those 3 bits of advice, if you will, I think tie back to the what is your what framework, which is comprised of understanding what your core gift is, the primary vehicle that you use to share that gift, and then third, the people that you're most compelled to serve. So the 3 bits of advice then would be, number 1, make sure that you're really clear on what your core gift is, because you are wired to excel in very specific ways. And so, you can call it your zone of genius. You can call it, being in flow or whatever. I don't care what you call it. But you have a core gift, whether it's communicating or teaching or healing or protecting or enrolling or entertaining. I mean, you name it, you have a core gift. So I do think that you have to have clarity around what that core gift is for you, and make sure that that's where you invest the majority of your time, right? And then secondly, you have to figure out what is the primary vehicle that I will be using to share that gift. And if you can gain clarity on that primary vehicle, let's just say hypothetically that your primary gift, your core gift is healing. Like that's just, you're just a healer. You're a natural born healer. Well, the primary vehicle that you might use then to share that gift might be psychotherapy, or it might be massage or acupuncture, or whatever it is that you choose. So you have to have that clarity around what that primary vehicle is. And then, of course, the third piece of the what is your what framework, and the third bit of advice here is to have a very clear understanding of the people, in terms of the people that you are most compelled to serve. And if you can get clear on your gift and get clear on your vehicle and get clear on the people that you are most compelled to serve, I think you're going to find yourself to be much more fulfilled, feeling like you have a much greater sense of contribution. And also that you're being compensated in a way that is aligned with how you believe you deserve to be compensated.
Yeah, I absolutely love that, because it's an inside out approach, and it's quite contradictory to what a lot of the so-called experts teach you out there, which is, find a market, find a problem and fulfill that. Yeah. Which I think is great. But I also think is often very transactional and very much around chasing the materialistic gains, as opposed to what you're sharing is more around, well, how can we actually find something that's fulfilling to our spirit, to our soul, in such a way that helps others as well. And, I certainly know from my own experience and the people we work with is, once you get the alignment with that, everything you need is taken care of in that scenario.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah, I totally get it. And, look, at the end of the day, I'm just one guy I'm just sharing what has worked for me and what works for my clients. And it may not necessarily work for you. I mean, you may find that going out, and I mean, we had Naveen Jain on Beyond 8 Figures, who is a billionaire, and I mean, he's done all sorts of interesting, some controversial things over the years from an entrepreneurial perspective. But his take on it is, if you want to become a billionaire, identify a problem that a billion people are afflicted by, right? And then create the solution for that problem. Well, that's all well and good, but, if you don't care about providing clean drinking water to a billion people, then why on earth would you spend the next 2 decades of your life building a business that provides clean drinking water to people? You know what I mean? Like, it's just not for everybody.
Yeah. And I think that ties in beautifully too to what you said before as well, Steve, that, we talk about the resilience, and you know, I feel that a business owner that's aligned to their purpose or aligned to where they're going has a deeper sense of resilience to tackle those hard times when they come, and they will come. Like, I've never met a business owner that hasn't experienced a significant amount of adversity or challenge to get to where they want to go on the journey of getting there. And I think that, you know, the more that we can align with that internal state of purpose of what we're doing, the more that we're able to overcome that adversity when it does present itself. We've got the energy and the stamina and the passion to drive through it.
Yeah. And, you know, look, I mean, if there is something that truly puts fire in your soul and you just feel like, you know, you would do it even if you didn't get paid a cent to do it, and you feel like there's not enough hours in the day to get done what you've got to get done, and you just jump out of bed every morning and you're like, man, I got to get to this, right? Then it's really not going to matter what life throws at you and what business throws at you. You're going to stay focused on your vision and bringing that to fruition. And so that's the challenge is finding that whatever that is for you, that truly puts that fire in your soul. And that is the challenge. But once you find that, it's amazing. It's amazing what happens. And you talk about, you know, sort of that self-assuredness and having that confidence and so on. You know, if you believe enough in the vision of what it is that you know can be for you or whatever that business is that you're looking to create, it's pretty hard for anyone to tell you otherwise.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Is that, you know, finding what that is that something that someone can go through a process to do from your experience, or is it just a matter of a time thing and being consciously aware to stay open to it, presenting itself?
Yeah, I mean, both, but at the same token, there are a lot of people who have been faced with a lot of opportunities and just couldn't see it and didn't pursue it, right? So I think that what, at least in my world, I think that what works best is to immerse yourself in whatever that world is, even if it's on a volunteer basis as an apprentice or volunteer, whatever. But once you have an inkling that, like, you know, I really want to work with athletes, like that's what I want to do, is I want to work with sports people, then, you know, somehow you have to immerse yourself in that world and see if in fact that is what you want to do. I mean, before you go to school and get that degree, or before you do all of these, you know, various things, you just got to immerse yourself in that world. And that, again, that could be a volunteer, it could be an apprentice, it could be a part-time position. You know, just ask till you're blue in the face, you know, who do you know that's in this industry? Right? Who do you know that has this type of job? Can I go in and can I sit down? Can I talk to them? You know, interview people, right? I mean, do a podcast like you're doing, right? I mean, do a podcast around that industry, sit down with people, and then see if it's actually something that you want to do, right? Because you can talk to people and they'll give you insight on it. I mean, it's certainly a free, easy way to immerse yourself in that culture. Yeah.
And as you say, too, worst case, you can always go back to pumping gas.
Exactly.
Nothing lost, nothing gained.
Yeah, exactly.
Steve, mate, it's been an absolute pleasure. For the guys out there today, how can they find you?
Well, we've been talking a little bit about what is your what and discovering your what. And I would say probably the best thing to do is go to whatisyourwhat.com and pick yourself up a free copy of that book. We do give away the entire New York Times bestseller. So yeah, maybe just go there, pick up free copy of What Is Your What. Discover the one amazing thing you were born to do at whatisyourwhat.com.
Awesome. Steve Olsher, mate, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the Comeback Game podcast. For those of you watching, listening, please like, comment, and share it to others who you think need to hear what we've had to share.